everyone, this is Amanda Moore from the Angelman Syndrome Foundation, and you're listening to the ASF podcast, the show that explains everything you want to know about Angelman Syndrome. We're so excited you're here, and we hope you enjoy the show. For this week's podcast, we have repurposed a webinar that was recorded in years past, but the information is still very much relevant today. We hope this information helps you on your journey. Enjoy the listen. Okay, I think we are live, so thank you all for joining us tonight with another installment of AS Chats with your friend Amanda. I'm so excited tonight because this is a topic that is really interesting to me and is one that I struggle with in our household because I think so much of the diet is so important, but I have a very picky eater. And so I am just really excited to be with our friend Heidi tonight. I'm going to ask Heidi if you can just introduce yourself to the community. That would be great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Heidi Pfeifer. I'm a dietitian. I work at Mass General Hospital as well as in private practice, and I've worked for the past 25 plus years with the ketogenic diet. So just a little bit of experience, and along those lines and along the road, we developed low glycemic index treatment and found also that what a great results that we've found with the Angelman population. So it's been a really nice road. It's a rewarding job. I love what I do, so it helps. And then treating patients like the angels, it's probably one of my favorite populations. And I'm not just saying that because of where I'm talking tonight, but they give a lot of rewarding experience. So
I agree as well. They're my favorite population as well. So, and just so you guys know, Heidi's been a huge part of this community for a long time, working at the AS clinic with Dr. Ron Thiebert, which that name is not a name not known in households around here. So I know that I'm sure Ron is very lucky to have you, as you are very lucky to have Ron. Heidi's also working with the ASF to work on a pilot program to where we can provide some more one-on-one support for families as they're looking into these different diets and how that supports individuals with Angelman syndrome. So there's going to be a lot more to come to that. So stay tuned. So we only have a little while with my friend Heidi tonight. So we're going to jump right into some questions. For those of you guys watching tonight, hi, it's so good to see you all. You can ask some comments in the comment section. Make sure you pop in and say hi so we can see that you're here. I see that we have quite a few people watching, so thanks for being here tonight. But let's just get right into it, Heidi. Tell me some overall benefits of diet for children, I should say individuals, both children and adults with Angelman syndrome.
So in our first study, we saw that over 80% had a 90% reduction in seizures. And so, when we think about actually in just the general epilepsy population, only a third of those that go on the diet have a greater than 90% reduction. So better than, the average child with epilepsy. So that right away made us kind of look at it a lot more, but kind of thinking about the other benefits of, that sometimes go along hand in hand with the improved seizure control is the sleep. Also improved development going along with the improved sleep and improved seizures,
Sure.
But just even sometimes independent from the seizure control. So those are definitely benefits.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when we think about, the different things that happen with Angelman syndrome, when we think about seizures, a lot of times seizures happening because there's other things going on. So it could be really bad constipation, it could be sleep, it could be fever or whatever. So sometimes, I think Dr. Thiebert quoted it once, like if you can manage the symptoms, you can really control seizures in some ways as well. And I think the diet is one of those things. We are seeing a lot of families have a lot of different successes of managing seizures, controlling seizures with this diet. We've had people report behavior changes, positive behavior changes with this diet. So I think that there's a lot of overall benefits to doing the diet. I think, so I would say you already talked a little bit about why being on the diet is beneficial for those who have seizures. I think you could get on different organizations like the Charlie Foundation, or even look at the studies that you guys did. And there's just so much data that supports that these diets really do show a huge improvement for kids who have who have epilepsy altogether, not just, not just, the epilepsy that happens in the Angelman syndrome, but epilepsy altogether. The diet seems to be very popular for that. So I would say the biggest thing, I think, for me, and being a kind of a newer person to this diet, I will tell you, for all my friends out there, I'm going to be very transparent right now. The CEO of Angelman Syndrome Foundation is going to tell you I have tried this diet numerous amounts of times, and I have failed numerous amounts of times because I have a child who's obsessed with anything that is bread in a carbohydrate. So that's been a real challenge for us. But, for those families that are listening, what is the best way for someone to start the diet? Do they need to be under supervision of a doctor or a hospital, or should they meet with a dietitian first? Can you just, for people that are thinking about getting started, what would you suggest?
Right. So, definitely needs to be followed by, our recommendation is supervised by a physician as well as a dietitian. Physician, with Dr. Thiebert, I work really well together, managing both aspects. Treating these kids, it's global, so it's not just one thing or the other. It's really working together to treat the full child, or adult. So kind of when we think about starting the diet, we think also, it's not just taking away one candy, and there are some things that we call simple swaps that you can start taking out by just changing out the amount of juice or any of the simple carbohydrates that you're taking in. So starting that way, just to see if it's something that your child can do. But I would stop there before seeing anybody and making really bigger changes, because when we think about what is the diet, so the diet is based off of, hundreds of years ago. Actually, this year is the centennial of the ketogenic diet being used in the treatment of epilepsy. So
perfect day to have this, right?
Not quite today, exactly, but this year. So it's a little bit something to celebrate. So thinking of how the diet came about is that, it was used for, fasting was used as a treatment for epilepsy. So, and then they said, well, obviously fasting, isn't going to work for long-term treatment. So what can we do? What does the body do during fasting? And what can we do to kind of mimic that starvation state? And so two ways you can do that is you can either now a big thing is intermittent fasting. Obviously, we're not going to be doing that with these kids.
Sure.
But also, when we switch by using higher amounts of fats and lower amounts of carbohydrates, you're kind of tricking your body into thinking it is fasting or starving, in that it's using its fats as its energy source versus its carbohydrates. And so this is a huge metabolic shift. And so that's why you really want to be followed closely by a dietitian and a doctor, because you're going to be looking at labs to see what, in that shift, you're not only changing over from using your fats from your carbohydrates to using your fats, but also there's, this balance, also your acid-base balance. And so that can be thrown off as well. And so, and monitoring weight too, making sure the children are growing adequately. As we know, even that can be a stressor, which can exacerbate seizures and not have as positive of an outcome.
Sure. So. Yeah, I think, for a parent who is trying to get started, I mean, can you give like a sense of hope of like that this type of diet or this type of looking at, helping with seizures or helping with other symptoms, that it can be something that can be started at any time in a child's life? I know it may be harder once they're older and they develop their taste buds, but can you give a sense of hope, like for someone who's out there who maybe has an individual with Angelman syndrome who's 15 now, and they're like, this could be a really good thing for my child, but can I start now?
Absolutely. So I think, I never say never. And, I gave up long ago figuring out who's going to be the best candidate from like just looking at their, intake forms. We've had kids that are at 400 grams of carbohydrates. That was somebody literally who just drank smoothies all day, and like berries. And so, way high. But, even that person, we're able to transition over. So it's really just working with each individual, seeing what works best for them. Even if it's just kind of altering what they're taking in small steps. And so if you want to just start that way, you can do that. But kind of, I'd never say if you're too old to start. If you're having seizures or want to look at other benefits that the diet provides, it's never too late to start.
That's good news, because I always feel like I start and then I'm like, I can't do it anymore. I can't, it's too much.
The way we think of it also is it is a healthier way of eating. You're really taking out a lot of the processed foods. A lot of, when we think about shopping the grocery store, you're shopping the periphery, not the packaged foods as much, shopping, fruits, vegetables, and those are the mainstay of the carbohydrate allotment. So a little bit healthier.
So in my mind, I think of like, when I'm trying to do this with Jackson, I'm like, okay, like he loves peanut butter and jelly. So what I could do is switch out the bread to be more of a low sugar bread. I could do a no sugar added jelly, and then like some low fat peanut butter or whatever. I mean, is that silly to think that way? Am I just totally missing the mark of getting started, or
not at all? But just in the little details, and that's, I think, with the diet, a lot of it is. So you mentioned peanut butter, so just making it sure it's a sugar-free peanut butter. The sugar-free jelly probably has things in it that he shouldn't have, like artificial sweeteners. That could be another topic a little bit, but also, so just instead of that, so sugar-free peanut butter, low carb or appropriate bread, and then instead of having the jelly, just squishing either raspberries or slicing strawberries or things like that he can have on that, or even just if you wanted to have some frozen strawberries and then just melting them down.
Okay.
And if he needs a little bit more sweetness, even adding in a sweetener to it.
A sweetener. See, well, I'm getting close, right? Okay, so one of the questions we had was, I know some parents worry about diet and their children gaining weight or have fear of the high level of fat intake. How can you make them feel better about this?
So, everybody equates.
If you can.
No, absolutely. So everybody equates, and I think this is also part of, how we were raised, that fat makes you fat. Fat is unhealthy. Fat is fat is good. Your brain really likes fat. Fat does not make you fat. It's actually the carbohydrates. I might be a little bit biased, but it's the carbohydrates that you're eating along with the fats versus having just the higher amount of fats, even 60%. It's not going to make you fat. It's the overall calories. So if you're just consuming too much, that's where the added weight gain is going to be.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and I'll get back to some of those other questions in a minute, but it just kind of hit me a little bit here of just, for outside of the improvement in the possible, we saw 90% of individuals with Angelman syndrome have improvement in their seizures. Are there other things that you have seen improvement in with individuals when they're on this diet?
Like you mentioned, the behavior, the sleep, also cognition, and just kind of being more in tune sometimes. So positive benefits.
Now, I know that you're not a neurologist, but when you're starting to think about an LGIT or a keto diet, one, it's really important to have those conversations with your physicians, your doctors, or whatever. But one of the questions that came in was, do you, at any point when you're on these diets, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but do you have to adjust any of the medications because of the diet? Is that something that Dr. Thiebert looks at when he's on when he's on the diet, or is it still kind of business as usual when it comes to seizure medication when you're on the diet?
We do take it into consideration, and that we also, when we monitor them, we monitor labs, and including in those labs are their medication levels. And so sometimes, we have seen in the past with benzodiazepines that sometimes when they're becoming more ketotic, that they just hit them a little bit harder. So just something, and it's really just clinically also just adjusting meds as we would anyway. So because if they're on low glycemic, and I guess also kind of stepping back now that I'm thinking about this, when we think about diets, there's the low glycemic index treatment, and that's kind of where my mindset is. And so when that's about a 1-to-1 ratio of 1 gram of fat to 1 gram of protein and carbohydrates combined. And then there's the classic ketogenic diet, which is much higher in fat. So that's when we see kind of the interaction a little bit more with medications. But there's not one medication that people say, okay, if you're on this, you can't be on the diet.
Okay, that's good to know. So one of the questions that came in was, some individuals with AS have an intolerance to dairy. Is diet possible without the fat from dairy?
Absolutely. So you can find fat from other sources. Avocado, one of my favorite foods. Perfect ketogenic ratio of a 4-to-1 in and of itself. Also coconut, great source of fat. You can use coconut oil, you can use coconut milk. So lots of different sources. There's a lot of, nuts have a great source of fats. Macadamia nut, also another perfect food. That's a 4-to-1 ratio. So we can work around the dairy intolerance. As with any kid, even with allergies, we can also, manipulate the diet to, account for any allergies. If it's an egg, if it's milk, if it's nuts, we've done diets.
Okay, good. Well, that's good to know. So, so one of the questions was, do you have, or what are some of your best go-to snacks when it comes to the LGIT diet?
So go-to snacks, definitely macadamia nuts and avocados, again, because they're the 4-to-1 ratio. So you don't have to worry about balancing it, because with the diet, we're also balancing not just having low carbs, but making sure you're getting adequate protein and fat and together with the carbs. So never having the carb just by itself. So other things, mascarpone cheese, also 4-to-1 ratio. There are some snacks that are commercially available. One of them is called fat snacks, that the crackers, and then again, this gets into the details of it.
Yeah.
The crackers are okay, but any of the other cookies and the cookies and brownies, I think those all have erythritol, which is an artificial sweetener that I don't like in the diet. So
that's good to know. Yeah, because I think for especially a family or a caregiver who has a child with Angelman syndrome, sometimes having those really easy go-to things. Because I think for me, I get really overwhelmed because this was not a way that I was raised either. I was raised on a totally different diet. I didn't eat an avocado until I was on my own and a grown woman. It just was not something we did in our family. So when you're trying to learn, even within yourself, a whole new way of thinking about things and eating, sometimes having those really easy go-to things make life a little bit easier when you're trying to do this, especially when you get frustrated. For Jackson, he's like, where's my peanut butter and jelly? Where's my mac and cheese? Those things that are horrible, but they're comfort foods to him. Instead of getting, stressing out and giving up on it, having some ease in that. So I would say, do you have a resource that is one of your favorite go-to resources when it comes to maybe some recipes or some starting from scratch on LGIT or whatever that you would recommend? Outside of you, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but some easy things that parents can look up and make this a little easier for them.
So 2 of my trusted go-to resources are the Charlie Foundation. They have great recipes. One of the moms that has a child that's been on the diet for years is amazing, just amazing what she comes up with. And so, all the recipes are vetted. We know that they are within the ratios, they're fine. Same thing, Matthew's. So Matthew's Friend is the same kind of, but over in the UK as Charlie's Foundation is to us here. Awesome. So, and they have also just recipes that they work well with.
Hey guys, it's Amanda here. As you know, we're here for you, our community. If you have questions about any topics we can discuss in our podcast, or if you have ideas for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. All you need to do is email me at dearamanda@angelman.org. Thank you so much for listening and your continued support of the Angelman Syndrome Foundation.
And Catherine, if I know you're monitoring right now, our amazing resource director is monitoring right now. If you could happen to put the links of those in the chat, that would be awesome. And then a couple more questions, because I know we got you here for a couple more minutes. Just because something is advertised as low carb, can it still be consumed on diet? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Absolutely. So, okay. And it's probably one of my frustrating moments looking. So, as working with the diet for so many years, it's great because all these new products are now coming out. The popularity of the diet has been amazing with recipe ideas, with foods. But the other side of that is that not all of them are compatible. So when I think about those types of foods, I think about there's the popular version of the diet, and then there's the medical version. And so we are really looking at the medical version. We treat the diet like we would any medication, and we titrate it up, we titrate it down. But we also look at the details of the products. So that being said, there's also low carb, and there's also my favorite, which is keto certified. I don't know who's certifying it. It is not me, but they don't look at it the same way that I do. So kind of looking at each product that with an individual eye for what we are looking at. So making sure that it doesn't have artificial sweeteners, doesn't have sugar added, and just going with the guidelines of how to read the label from the medical diet standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part, because once again, I was not raised to understand how to read the label. All I see is this is how many calories are in it, this is how much sugar, or when it says this is how much sugar, then there's that line right below it where it's like additional sugar or something like that. And I'm like, okay, well, that's low. That's great, right? So,
well, that's actually just changed. It just went into effect truly this year, that added sugar, which is actually a really good thing for the diet, because when we're looking at total carbohydrates that these kids can have, then they actually break it down for us. How much is coming from fiber? How much is coming from artificial sweeteners, and how much is coming from added sugar? So is it strawberries that are just, so is that carbohydrate just coming from the strawberries, or did they put sugar on it to make those strawberries taste even better?
Yeah.
So
see, some of this, I'm like, I wish I would have done like a nutrition 101 class in college or something, so I could be better with this. That's why we have you. So another thing, one of the questions that came out was, do you recommend supplements at all?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So when we think about the diet and, we're the macronutrients, that's the big part of it, how much protein, fat, and carbohydrates, we're really reducing the amount of carbohydrates and increasing the amount of fat. So where are all those vitamins and minerals coming from? They're coming from mostly the carbohydrates. And so we have to really, if we're limiting those to 40 to 60 grams, we really need to make sure we're adding those back in, just to make sure that there are no vitamin and mineral deficiencies on it. So it's a huge piece that I always look at, and kind of look at where they're at and making sure everybody's getting what they need to.
So that that's probably part of the point, part of the important point of being followed by a dietitian, or being at one of the clinics or with your clinician, because you can do some of that blood work ahead of time to see some of that, right?
Right.
Okay, cool. So I think there are some questions that came through at chat. Let me look really quickly. So one of the questions, so go ahead.
Actually, the other point, I was going to say, while you're looking at that, is that supplements aren't always created equal. So also kind of my other thing that looking at labels is that this whole supplement market is not regulated. And so not every supplement's created equal, and they don't have to have what they say in it unless they actually have a little seal on it that says, like a USP seal. So they're different brands, and that's why I also recommend different brands, because we've looked into what they have in them, and that they actually have what they say they have in them.
Well, and I can tell you one thing, walking into a supplement store is about as stressful as walking into like a Chuck E. Cheese, because there's just too much. Like if you want a melatonin, you have 90 million different options for a melatonin. So, so that's interesting that once again, like you said, that there are so many different supplements out there, and some of them may not even be the right ones.
Yeah.
That's terrifying. Someone had mentioned that their child's ability to attend tasks has been much better on the diet. So that's really, really exciting. Someone asked, what's the difference between a net carb and a carb in reference to the diet?
Oh, good question. So a net carb and a total carb. So net carb is actually a manufacturer-driven kind of thing. It's, again, also not regulated. And so what it should be is actually the total carbs minus the fiber and sugar alcohols. That's what is supposed to be the net carb. And if you do the math, that doesn't always add up. And so that's also one of the reasons why with the low glycemic, we count total carbs versus net carbs. So that way we're just looking at the total and we know what we're getting. That being said, because fiber is lower in glycemic index, so we're also looking at foods that have higher in fiber. So we are kind of accounting for that.
Okay. It just seems like I'm in a science class right now, but a very good one, but a science class. There was a question came up, and I don't think you can answer this, but maybe you can, but I can give a little thought to it. Someone asked about the keto powder that they were testing. I think it's Disruptive Nutrition was testing a keto powder for the kids to get in ketosis. And that study, I think, is still being completed and still looking at the data. So I would say that wait and see what comes out from that, and wait and see the results and the data from that. It's not been released yet from what I understand. But as soon as it is, I'm sure that we will make sure to get that out to the public.
So I think kind of on those lines, those are based off of keto esters. And so there's different ways, there's salts as well, but they're not long acting. So, yes, it would be easier if we could just do the ketogenic diet in a pill and not have to change what you're eating. And especially for picky eaters like Jack.
Yeah.
So, I think, yes, it would be great. But I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done on it. And I know they've been researching it for other avenues as well, not just Angelman syndrome.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of work that's being done and coming down the pike. And it would be great if we could supplement, esters if needed. That being said, I don't think, so one of the things that we did see in the studies that we've done is that it's not necessary that they have to be in ketosis to have a seizure control or benefit from the diet. And so, how much do these esters help this population? I'm not sure either. So, but I think that's something also that will come out probably with, the study. That would be great to see.
Yeah. So I think, and Catherine, I don't know if you'll be able to find this in time for us to wrap it up, but the ASF did fund a study around the LGIT and keto diet. It was a while back, but I think we have all the information from this study that Heidi is speaking to on our website somewhere. So Catherine, maybe you can look at it and just add it to the chat eventually. But we'll recap, like I said, we'll recap this session and give everyone, because some people are asking for Heidi's contact information, which we'll have end on this really quickly. But and this is not really diet related, but I do know that, and maybe you can help with this. There are a lot of our individuals with Angelman syndrome who really struggle with weight gain. Do you have any recommendations for any appetite boosters or really high fat or anything to help individuals with Angelman syndrome who are really struggling with actually keeping and gaining weight?
So appetite boosters, I don't have any big ones. A lot of times, if that's the case, we'll rely on medications to help just kind of get that boost. But kind of also thinking about, and it's not for every, that this is what impacts for every child, that why their appetites decrease, but also kind of, again, thinking globally and what's kind of occurring with each patient is thinking also, why is their appetite decreased? And sometimes, especially with these guys, the reflux, that can go either way. They can start actually eating more just to treat the reflux, or if they're constipated, and everything's up to here, they're not really going to want to eat anything. So kind of looking at those avenues first, and then if needed, the medication to get them to gain weight or increase their appetite, and then really just working with what foods they are and upping the fats and the calories. And sometimes, and that's easier said than done. But because they also don't really sit still, so they're burning it all off.
Yeah, and I think, in some of the seizure medications, side effect can be a loss of appetite too. So looking at that as well, right, is that could be an issue. Yeah. So I have to ask the opposite. So what suggestions do you give for our individuals with Angelman syndrome who are struggling with actually losing weight?
Monitoring what they're getting, and really portion sizes is a big thing, just making sure that they're not and again looking at why, if they're eating more, is it they're just consuming higher amounts of calories? Is it because they're eating more to treat the reflux and that's why they've gained the weight? So really kind of looking at what's going on to treat not just the weight piece, but also what is causing the increase in weight.
So Heidi, I know we only have a few more minutes here, and I want to make sure to just let people know the resources that we have and that you have to support this. The great thing is Catherine's already put the study in the chat, but she's also put Heidi's information to her website. And so I wanted to also, I'm going to let her talk about that and some of the services she can provide, but also let you guys know that this is obviously Heidi works with the ASF AS clinic at MGH with Dr. Siebert. So, we could work on getting consultations and appointments set with you. But Heidi, tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what you can provide and how people can connect with you to help in this journey for them.
So because we know that not everybody can make it out to Mass General, of being able to provide that service and knowing that, not every center has a dietitian or not every person is in the place where a dietitian is local or able to get to. So one of the reasons why I set up my private practice was also to treat those that can't get to where they need to be or are outside of if they're adults or so kind of providing the same type of treatment via virtual visits and just going through diet, going through and treating each individual patient. So
now, and you can see anybody from anywhere in the United States. Awesome. So the link is in the website on the chat box there. Heidi will also be doing a full session at our conference in August. So you could definitely come back and check her out there. If you want to get in contact with her, I would highly suggest it. She has been pivotal for so many of our families, and especially for our family here at the Moore household. Even though we still struggle, it's not because she doesn't know what she's talking about. It's because the Moore family and Jackson are stubborn, but we love him for that and is willing to give us a run for our money every once in a while. But Heidi, we just want to thank you for all that you do for the community. We could talk to you all night long, but we know that you've got a life to get back to. But thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you everyone who showed up tonight. I hope you are enjoying these AS chats with Amanda. And Heidi, we'll see you in August at the conference.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Good night.
Thanks for listening to the ASF podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support us, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating or review. And please don't forget to subscribe.